In his memoir, Sandra Dee's son unveiled the nightmares his mother faced at the hands of her family, but in a startling revelation, it was Dee herself who harbored the most heartbreaking secret of all. Once an angel of the silver screen, Sandra Dee began her career as a child model before transitioning to film. The blonde beauty enchanted audiences in the 1950s with her all-American appeal, and even today, she is often remembered as the quintessential good girl. Yet, the reality of her life was far more complex and troubling. From her traumatic childhood experiences to the hidden struggles that plagued her, Sandra Dee's existence was marked by shadows that starkly contrasted with her public persona. The glamorous facade masked a life filled with pain, betrayal, and secrets that would shock those who believed they knew her story. As layers of her life are peeled back, it becomes clear that the truth about Sandra Dee is far darker than the image she projected to the world. Sandra's troubles began right when she was a child born in the early 1940s to her teenage mother Mary. Sandra's father was out of the picture when she was still just a toddler, leaving the two women mostly to fend for themselves. This closeness, however, was a very bad thing. Mary soon developed an unhealthy obsession with her daughter, one that would shape Sandra's life forever. When Mary realized her daughter was turning into a strikingly beautiful little girl, her response was disturbing. Mary began dressing up Sandra and using her as a living doll, constantly doing her up in intensely adorable outfits, like a skirt with an Eisenhower jacket and a little hat. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning. Mary didn't just treat her daughter like a doll, she was also eerily codependent on her. Creepy enough, Sandra's mother insisted on spoon-feeding her until she was 6 years old. When Sandra was old enough to attend school, Mary frequently kept her home anyway to keep her company, lying and saying it was raining outside while drawing the curtains closed. This behavior only got stranger when Sandra was 5. Her mother began a romance with Eugene Dubin, a dashing New York City real estate mogul. Instead of tempering her obsession with Sandra, it only seemed to heighten it. Sandra recalled that when the newlyweds went on their honeymoon, she slept between them. More than that, Dubin always said he was marrying both her and Mary. It was enough to make anyone dysfunctional, but Sandra had so much more where that came from. At a young age, Sandra Dee's mother recognized her daughter's striking beauty and seized the chance to exploit it. By the time Sandra was 8 years old, she began her modeling career, taking on small jobs for brands like Girl Scouts. As she grew, her talent blossomed, and by the age of 11, she was a full-fledged professional model, earning nearly $8,000 a year. However, this financial success did not grant Sandra the independence she needed. Instead, it fueled her mother's relentless ambitions. When Sandra entered puberty, the situation worsened. Her mother, Mary, became increasingly controlling, insisting that Sandra bind her chest to suppress her developing curves. This obsession with keeping Sandra looking prepubescent led to severe consequences. The immense pressure of modeling, coupled with her mother's misguided guidance, contributed to Sandra developing a dangerous eating disorder. She later revealed that she survived on little more than lettuce for an entire year. Rather than seeking help for her daughter, Mary only pushed her harder, intensifying the struggles Sandra faced during those formative years. By the mid-1950s, Sandra Dee's mother had her sights firmly set on Hollywood. At just 11 years old, Sandra began riding the subway alone to auditions, showcasing her determination and ambition. She attended a special performing arts school, alongside other budding stars like Tuesday Weld, striving to cultivate a sophisticated image for herself. However, her journey took a heartbreaking turn in 1956 when her stepfather, Eugene Dubin, passed away from a heart attack. This tragedy sent the family into a tailspin, affecting them in numerous ways. Despite her grief, Sandra demonstrated remarkable resilience. Just days after Dubin's funeral, she managed to attend a screen test. Disturbingly, her heartbroken state became the very emotion that won her the job. During her screen test with powerful producer Ross Hunter, Sandra could not stop crying. Instead of being alarmed by her tears, Hunter saw an opportunity. He recognized the potential in this tiny, lovely, sophisticated girl, and envisioned how mothers around the world would aspire for their daughters to be like little Sandra Dee. This moment marked a significant turning point in her career, setting the stage for her future in Hollywood. Dee's first film was in 1957's Until They Sail, where she played a young girl facing the challenges of love. In this film, she shared the screen with heavyweights like Paul Newman and Joan Fontaine. Interestingly, Dee secured her role through an enormous lie. The studio believed she was 14 years old, but in reality, she was only 12. At that age, her body was still quite underdeveloped, leading the studio to have her wear a rubber suit underneath her clothes to create the illusion of more curves. This situation was not the most awkward part of her early career. Having spent so much time in an adult environment, Dee found herself unsure of how to act like a typical child. Her excitement about her changing body led her to approach her 32-year-old co-star, Paul Newman, exclaiming, "Mr. Newman? Mr. Newman? Want to see my body?" This moment was just a glimpse into the unusual experiences she faced. Despite these challenges, Dee's career quickly took off, establishing her as a bona fide American sweetheart. Following her early success, Sandra Dee starred in notable films like Imitation of Life, where her charm and beauty captivated audiences. She was often compared to child star Shirley Temple by gossip columnist Luella Parsons, who praised her innocent looks. However, behind the glamorous facade, Sandra's life was far from perfect. Despite her cheerful on-screen persona, she faced significant personal struggles. The young actress grappled with her eating habits, finding herself in a cycle of binging and purging. Every Saturday, she would indulge in walnuts, only to later drink Epsom salts to rid herself of the calories. This troubling behavior highlighted the pressure she felt to maintain her image in Hollywood. As she navigated her career, the weight of these struggles loomed heavily over her. In this vulnerable state, Sandra was on the brink of making a decision that would change her life forever. Sandra Dee met Bobby Darin on the set of Come September, where he played her charming young co-star. Despite her initial reluctance, Bobby's persistent pursuit of Sandra led to a blossoming romance. The couple eloped, but soon faced marital issues as Bobby demanded Sandra's devotion and constant presence at his shows. As their relationship deteriorated, Bobby's paranoia about Sandra's alleged affairs triggered a series of separations and reconciliations, ultimately culminating in their final and irreconcilable split in 1966. Sandra and Bobby's tumultuous marriage rewrote the narrative of a perfect and idyllic romance, revealing the darker side lurking beneath their glamorous facade. Unfortunately, the end of Dee's relationship with Darin also spelled the end of many other things in her life. In the late 1960s, Dee experienced more disheartening upheavals. As she grew older, and was no longer the fresh-faced innocent beauty, audiences stopped coming to her films. It wasn't long before Universal Studios dropped her unceremoniously from their roster. In response, Dee started truly spinning out of control. Up until now, she had kept most of her private issues extremely private, playing the good girl everyone wanted her to be. However, she made a bitter public revelation in a 1967 interview with Roger Ebert, where she openly smoked and sneered, "Little Sandra Dee isn't supposed to smoke, or drink, or breathe." Tragically, she had more trials coming. Dee tried desperately to keep working during this time, but her roles were slim, often playing somewhat to type. She took part as a college girl in the supernatural film The Dunwich Horror, though she refused the script's direction to appear without her clothes in the final scenes. Still, none of this moved the needle on her career or her personal life. In fact, she started moving backwards. It wasn't enough that Dee's life was falling apart, but her ex-husband Bobby Darin wasn't making it any better. While Dee never remarried and never got over Darin, he tried to move on quickly from her. Soon after their split, he met secretary Andrea Gere and married her in 1973. Dee had to deal with her emotions about this, but that wasn't all she had to face. Darin did try to get on with his wife, but fate had different plans. His heart, which had never been good, was beginning to give out on him. In 1971, he received 2 artificial valves, and even though he was with Gere at the time, it was Dee he kept going to for comfort during these upsets. As Dee said, Bobby kept coming back, and always with an illness. Things quickly became complicated as Darin's health began failing, and so too did his marriage. He and Andrea Gere split in October of 1973 after only a few months together. However, there was a more scandalous reason for the split. With Darin always at her door, Dee eventually let him back into her heart, rekindling their relationship. Unfortunately, it would only end in tragedy. In December of 1973, Bobby Darin put his life on the line. Although he knew he was supposed to take antibiotics before any medical visits, the egotistical Darin went to the dentist without any prescribed protection. The results were chilling. He developed sepsis throughout his body, and the illness ravaged one of his artificial heart valves. Knowing he was in deep trouble, Darin checked himself into the hospital. It was a swift decline from there. By then, Darin was so sick from sepsis that he began developing dementia and barely understood where he was. While in the hospital, he managed one heartbreaking act of loyalty. Remembering it was his son Dodd's birthday, he called the boy from the hospital and wished him a tearful happy birthday. Within days, Darren would undergo surgery on his heart. All Dee could do was pray. During Darren's surgery, a team of doctors worked tirelessly for 6 hours to save the 37-year-old singer and love of Dee's life. Then they wheeled him into the recovery room to wait and see, but there was no miracle. Darren passed on December 19, 1973, without ever waking up from surgery. The aftermath for Sandra Dee was almost unimaginable. When she heard the news of her ex-husband's passing, she was beside herself with grief. More than that, her son Dodd was staying over at a friend's house, and Dee was all alone. Panicked, she called the boy's mother in the middle of the night and said she was coming to get Dodd. Dodd's mother, Kay, managed to talk Sandra down, convincing her to wait until morning, saying, "Believe me, he'll know for the rest of his life what happened." The next years of Sandra Dee's life were an uphill climb. Her son Dodd later admitted, "My mom never recovered from the loss of Bobby Darin. Although she tried to busy herself by taking on a series of guest roles, her career continued to flounder." Heartbreakingly, it was around this time that Dee famously said, "I feel like a has-been that never was." Eventually, Dee had enough. By the 1980s, she had all but retired from acting. It was much worse than that. She turned herself into a near recluse, focusing only on raising her son Dodd, and trying not to fight with her mother Mary, who was still around, and still imposing her will on everything. After all Dee had now was her family, but she wouldn't have that for long. In the late 1980s, Dee faced a heartbreaking challenge as her mother began suffering from lung cancer. The situation grew dire, and when Mary finally passed away, she managed to leave her daughter with a final, cutting remark. On her deathbed, she reportedly told her grandson not to be a victim like she was, and advised him not to waste his life cleaning up after Sandra. These harsh words took a toll on Dee, who had always struggled with her personal demons. After her mother's death, she spiraled out of control, giving in to her long-standing issues with eating and drinking. During this dark period, she admitted to surviving on nothing but soup crackers and scotch, leading her weight to plummet dangerously low. Dee's son witnessed his mother's distress and knew he had to intervene when she began vomiting blood. He encouraged her to seek mental and physical rehabilitation, a decision that likely saved her life. Gradually, she started to improve, and even showed interest in acting again. However, despite this brief period of recovery, her internal struggles proved too powerful to overcome. After this tumultuous time in the 1980s, Dee did not completely quit drinking, though she attempted to limit it. Unfortunately, the damage to her body was already done. As she reached middle age, she received a troubling diagnosis. Her years of mistreatment had led to kidney failure, and she required dialysis. This diagnosis finally pushed Dee to stop drinking altogether, but she had only a few precious years to enjoy sobriety. By 2005, Sandra Dee was in her early 60s, battling severe complications from kidney disease that no amount of dialysis could remedy. On February 20 of that year, she passed away in the hospital at the age of 62. This news shocked many fans who still remembered her as the youthful and vibrant actress she once was. In 1994, Sandra Dee's son Dodd unveiled a painful chapter of their family's history in his memoir about his parents, revealing Sandra's darkest secret. This secret was an unspeakable sin that had haunted her since childhood. From the age of 5, Sandra had been intimately mistreated by her stepfather, a trauma she only confided in her husband Bobby Darin after their marriage ended, and later to Dodd when he was no longer a boy. Tragically, this abuse marked the beginning of a life filled with pain. When Sandra finally found the courage to confront her mother about her stepfather's behavior, she was met with disbelief. Her mother, Mary, initially refused to see the truth, believing her husband to be a saint. This revelation altered Sandra's life profoundly. To the casual observer, she may seem like just a good girl who fell from grace, but understanding her past sheds light on her struggles with relationships, her body, and her mental health. Yet, it is important to note that Sandra Dee was more than just a victim of her circumstances. While her mother failed to protect her, she made every effort to safeguard Dodd, who grew up to be a devoted son and a loving father, breaking the cycle of pain that had plagued their family for so long.